Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank Motilal Oswal group for inviting me on a subject which is very close to my heart, the Make in India. I think once the all the bright and intelligent Indians brought a government with majority to the power at center, the whole environment was very different. There were three challenges in front of the government. Number one, rebuilding the confidence, because more or less, whether it is an investor within the country or across the globe, it was at its lowest ebb. Number two, bring the changes to the policy framework and allow an opportunity for the private investment from all over the world into the country, which is very, very badly required. Third, the real action. And fourth, what is that India will look like between 2015 to 2025. I think the Prime Minister Modi government did exceedingly well by rebuilding the confidence to a great extent. It created the right noise across the globe. He is selling India very ferociously, which is a very big news and a good news for all the Indians across the globe, across the country. Many areas, for example, defense, they brought the policy framework to allow 49% FDI and on a case-to-case basis 100%, which is a big thing. India, which has been importing 80% of the military hardware for last 68 years after the independence, 80% of military hardware, and wherein the Indians are second to none. Go to any large corporations across the globe, whether it is a Lockheed Martin or General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, United Technologies, everywhere the Indians rule the roost. And why it is that India cannot produce those equipments and systems which is critical for our national security can be built in India? I think there was a lack of confidence in our own community by the government. So thankfully this government have realized that and introduced a very fine policy framework, because unless and until you allow the foreign companies a reasonable stake, because they have developed the technology by spending a couple of billions of dollars over the 10-20 years of efforts, they are not going to transfer the technology unless they are confident that this technology is going to be protected and that they are going to also earn equally with the Indian partners. They are not going to invest even a cent if there is a minority opportunity available to them. My company, which has received 84% of the FDI received in this country, in the FDI, in the defense sector, that demonstrates that people across the globe has a very low opinion about investing into India in the defense sector. This government has, to a great extent, changed that perception by introducing a fine policy framework. So I think this is the second item, and this will lead to the Make in India concept. Make in India will only succeed if there are fine policy framework introduced by the government of India in several sectors. Many other sectors government introduced the further reforms, for example, construction industry or railways and several other sectors where the foreign capital can now flow in very easily. So the first three things happened. I was telling my colleagues that India can make or break in next 10 years. If the government continues to behave the way it is behaving last 8 months, I think India can become very close to our dream of every single Indian to become developed country. You have to get the serious investment, you have to start manufacturing, and the Make in India is one of the boldest and the path-breaking policy framework I would say one has seen since independence. My company started the infrastructure investment when there was no policy precedent. Country was almost a bankrupt. $800 million foreign exchange reserve, and we were pledging our national reserve gold to Bank of England. And that's the time the Bombay Club was also opposing the reforms. And we realized that unless the private sector capital, the private sector management, and the global capital comes into the country, this country cannot come out of the grave. So all about developing your own country in a just and fair manner. I think Make in India policy is one of the finest action and one of the finest statement that our Honorable Prime Minister can make for the betterment of our country. So next 10 years is going to be very vital. Next 10 years India can make and break. Because if someone puts in the, like what is happening in the last few months, one has seen in the parliament, most of the bills are approved through the different route. Now that is not what people want to see. It has to be approved in both the houses of parliament. Through ordinance route, it is not correct because the investment will not come. And we have all seen that there is a lot of investment coming into the secondary market, but primary market, there is no serious investment. That's where the government will have to put their act in place. They have to start acting firmly and to see that the bills are approved in the upper house as well. We have been, instead of building 60-70% of our GDP revenue must come from the manufacturing. Instead of that, it is only 22%. We are not America, where the 72% of the GDP revenue comes from the service industry. India gets about 64% from the service industry. We are not America. We have to start manufacturing. We have to understand that unless you build them in India, there is no way we can progress to the level we want to progress. And from that angle, the Make in India call given has been extremely, extremely valuable. I'll come to you for a few more. I'll tell you some few more points. 65% of our people are below poverty lines. They need jobs. And how can you get jobs? Most of the jobs will come from the manufacturing activities. So that is extremely important that we set up the manufacturing hubs across the country. And to that extent, we are making progress, but there is labor reforms, for example. It's why Indian manufacturing sector went down over last 2-3 decades. Because we had a very militant labor force, and the labor union has been very powerful, and no democratically elected government wanted to take on the labor unions. And that's why our manufacturing started going down, and which was advantage China. I call it the 1981 Chinese Revolution, Make in China. Many of you would know, but for those who have no information about this, I would like to share with you that in 1965, India built the first free trade zone. That's in Kandla. In 1970, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, the father of the nation of Singapore, a great visionary, he sent a company called Jurong Town, who master planned Singapore. He came to India to learn from the Kandla experience how to set up the free trade zone, basically for manufacturing and exports. 6 years later, in 1976, they came back to teach us how to do it better. But we were a very arrogant regime. We turned them back, which angered that visionary called Lee Kuan Yew. In 1977, he turned his vision towards Chinese. In 3 years, he could convince Chinese that what is good for you. And in 1981, the Chinese started the development of special economic zone, which was nothing but a manufacturing zones. The first zone was built at a place called Shenzhen across the Hong Kong harbor. I've been there in 1997. And in 16 years, by the way, Shenzhen, when it was conceived as the first special economic zone at the behest of that visionary Lee Kuan Yew, it was a fisherman harbor with 5,000 people and $500,000 revenue, which is nothing. Today, in 97, when I first went there, it was $45 billion exports, 4 million people, and it appeared to me that Chinese God has built the manufacturing hubs in the sky and brought it down. It was sin to be believed. Forbes magazine wrote in that year that highest ever in the human history, 38% CAGR has been achieved. I call it a Chinese revolution. The Make in China was conceived in 1981 or began in 1981 thanks to the vision of the Lee Kuan Yew, who we turned away in 1976. Today, that Shenzhen is one of the most busiest place for business, 5th largest airport in the world, 5th largest seaport in the world. A place which is 2/3 of Bombay could develop it thanks to the manufacturing activities. And today the export from Shenzhen is amounting to $155 billion. So it demonstrates that if you set up a manufacturing facility and if you are committed to achieve what our current government wanting to achieve through Make in India initiative, India can also prosper. We have to generate millions of jobs, and millions of jobs cannot be generated unless the manufacturing also picks up in a big way. There are short-term losses maybe. If you build in India, if you start to manufacture them in India, the cost may be slightly higher to start with. But it has a long-term ramification. It will be hugely beneficial. Today, a Chinese is exporting the idols of Lakshmi, Ganesh, kite. If I bring the kite from the ground floor shop to my terrace, half the kites are torn off, because then how could the Chinese send the kites in such a beautiful manner that it arrives from China to India and is still in a beautiful condition? Chinese are waging the low-cost war on India. Most of the people don't understand this. By spending few $1 billion and selling us the cheap stuff, he is making our labor force redundant. In my company, in an extremely small micro manner, we have introduced a policy that nothing Chinese make will not be bought by us, by any one of us. Because if we don't do it, each one of us has a responsibility towards that. This Make in India concept will never succeed. You will only buy Make in China. Made in China, you will always buy. That something is very dangerous for our country. What has happened in Arab Spring, it can also become, a similar thing can happen in India also. Because we have a more number of people who are unemployed. And they can't make their two ends meet even properly. So it is important that it is Make in India concept, it succeeds. And for which a manufacturing hub needs to be built. You have to build a world-class global scale infrastructure in an integrated fashion, which will be available to the users both within the country, across the globe, at a globally competitive prices. And this is not difficult. This needs to be done that way. I remember that in those years when I first went to China, I was wondering that why Indians, who has a better legal and justice system in place than Chinese, we are more English-speaking population, we are more reform-minded, and yet Chinese has marched far ahead of us. I also found out that people across the globe, when they would come to India, when they get the FIPB clearance, that's where they think they've won the world and they can start the business. That's where the horror story starts. 156 window opens up and they get tired and sick. 90% of the people, after getting FIPB approval, did not set up their shop in India. They went to Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, China, Bangladesh, even Pakistan. They've run away from India, which was very, very dangerous trend. And that's where we discussed with the government that we are late, but we could be latest. These manufacturing hubs must be built in India. Otherwise, this will be a catastrophe impact. Transaction time and cost is one of the highest in the world in our country. The manufacturing hubs will not succeed with this kind of lethargy, this kind of situation. So we had convinced government in those days that when there is a large manufacturing hubs, allow the developers to act as a municipality, so that they don't have to, users of the manufacturing hubs, don't have to run from pillar to post to get their small clearances. They are very irritating, and people are very corrupt in certain systems. It will be absolutely, not possible for even, forget about the foreigners, even our Indian entrepreneurs who succeed and succeed quickly. For example, they were to get the, for example, financing. Now, we told them that the financial center attached to each manufacturing zone, which would be large in size, of course, because getting the timely finance for a small factory owner is the biggest challenge. So sometimes it takes 6 to 12 months. The cost of the project goes up by 10%, at least 8 to 10%. By the time the financing is done, the cost has gone up. So either he will cut the corner, or probably he will not be able to develop the project. These are the issues which is the biggest issue which is facing our factory owners who want to start the manufacturing in the manufacturing hubs. So transaction time and cost needs to be reduced. So Make in India policy, of course, is a first statement, bold statement, path-breaking statement, but attached to that there are several points which needs to be handled and handled well. I made we had a meeting with the Chief Minister of Maharashtra State. We said we have he gave a call. He's a very visionary and very dynamic and a very straightforward person. He has a target of achieving 10% GDP for Maharashtra. Very good. Now, how do you achieve that? You have to take the physical action. Again, the manufacturing hub, smart cities. For example, smart cities is nothing but setting up a manufacturing zone. Unless there is a economic activities are part of the smart cities will fail. Nobody would move from even this place to 10 kilometers away from here unless there is economic activities. People will move to that place if there is economic activities, which is again a manufacturing. Because in a remote place or at near to tier 1, tier 2 cities, there is no much service industry. So you have to create the manufacturing activities. So whether it is a smart city or whether it is a Make in India, they are all interlinked. So we told the Chief Minister that there are low-hanging fruit, medium-hanging fruit and high-hanging fruits. So you have to start attempting to get all of them down. But more critically, if the low-hanging fruits are not implemented, all your vision will fall flat. For example, we have been hearing about, actively at least, 15 years, the Trans-Harbour Bridge will be built. International airport will be built. But that's still far away. Even if it takes the best of the decision and quickest decision, still it will take 2 years to start the construction. So half of his tenure gone. I told him that you could start the manufacturing hubs, the Make in India, Make in Maharashtra call that the respective central and state government has given. It's absolutely vibrant. But you need to start them, you need to implement, need to launch, to give confidence to the people. A lot of people asking me, we want to invest into manufacturing sector. Where do we invest? Now, there are none in India. Make in India policy has been announced like 8 months, but there are none in India, at least not that I know of, which has been launched where people like you and me can go and invest. So this is what is required. I think there are one good thing that has happened is that government has come up with a policy, the intent are very honorable, but who is starting it? A lot of foreign investors who I talk to, I have a relationship in many countries, they said, we want to come to India, can you recommend some good project where we can go and invest? So even I don't know about it. So the issue is that the policy framework is one thing, the genuine intent is one thing, but the implementation is a bigger challenge. So government has to now get into the action mode and to implement. They launch some project where people can come and invest. Where do we invest otherwise? All of us remember that in 1990, when the country was almost bankrupt, we had only 2 cars available at our disposal, either Ambassador or Fiat. Only very wealthy people could afford the top of the range cars. You and me could not. But the moment reforms introduced, everybody started coming here to manufacture. I remember one incident that about 7-8 years ago, I was in Brazil, and that particular year, the Petrobras, which is equivalent of ONGC, they raised $155 billion in equity and bonds and told people across the globe that if you want to do business with Brazil, come and manufacture here. We are not going to allow any import. You can keep 51%, 49% with our local people, and you can implement your vision, bring your capital, be very safe. It pushed Brazil on a fast track. I think very similar to that. We will have a bigger impact because Indians per se are very entrepreneurial and they are very vibrant. They will bring the technology from across the globe. They will adapt it very quickly. They'll start manufacturing. They will improve upon what they have got from, say, USA or UK or Germany or Japan. So we have those capable lot who can do much better once they get the technology in. They will learn it very quickly. I remember that in our Naval Defense Yard, we have many Japanese. So when Sumitomo Corporation CMD came, and one of our Japanese said that these guys, thousands of them, they may not be able to speak good English, but their absorption power is so good. And I feel so proud as a teacher, I could teach them, and Japanese could not speak good English, and this guy didn't understand English, so there was a huge challenge. But as far as the absorption of technology and the process is concerned, our people are second to none. So Indians per se has that ability to deliver, understand, and implement it also in a best possible manner. But what is important is that we have to ensure that this does not remain only a paper intent or paper policy. The real investment has to come, the real development process has to start, and we have to be sensitive about the challenges that people across the globe are facing, the transaction time and cost, or running around the multiple places for doing the business, and things like that. I think that Make in India policy can keep on talking, for hours and hours together. I have fortunately been working on the similar concept for almost over a decade and a half. I would rather like to have an interactive session beyond what I've said, and if that is going to help you, and I will be happy to answer if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi. Yeah, any questions for Mr. Gandhi? You could raise your hands.
Hello, sir. My question pertains to the defense sector. Recently, we understand that government has cleared a lot of projects, or DACS over the last 6 months cleared projects worth rupees 1.6 trillion. So, taking Make in India project into consideration, what sort of projects are reserved for buy and make India category? If you can just throw a bit of light on that particular thing.
I think currently India is facing very serious geopolitical challenges because our preparedness is gone down like this. Last 5 years, we had a very honest and a fine defense minister, but good was not good enough. He did not take any decisions. With the result, India is now facing Chinese from all over. India is encircled by China. They are at 7 sites across the India, and our worry has gone multifold. So this government has cleared the projects which will be awarded over the next 3 to 4 years, amounting to nearly $247 billion, out of which the naval segment cleared by Mr. Jetli before he gave away the defense portfolio to Mr. Parikar, amounting to $21 billion, which comprises of 6 stealth submarine, helicopter carrier, modernization of Russian origin submarines. If you recall that last year, we lost one submarine in accident. The second submarine almost fell redundant. And he also cleared a medium-sized warship called Corvettes. So the total project cleared by this government for bidding, which was on hold for 5 years, in less than 2 months after they came to power, and many of them are under the bidding stage. Some of the bids will be submitted over the next couple of months, because preparing the defense bid is a very complex subject. For example, if you have this size of usual ship, which will have 10,000 parts, but this size of warship will have 500,000 parts. It's a very, very different. So the Make in India call will get a huge fillip with the award of this contract. The government has been very clear that no matter what, the asset will be built in India, bearing few fighter jets or few missiles for next couple of years, till such time the factories are set up here and the people start building it. By the way, so defense has a policy now, as long as you can demonstrate that this particular asset can be built in India, nobody will be allowed to import. That's a very, very good policy. This benefit will be so huge, it can add probably a % to GDP.
So if you can also let us know, as you mentioned that most of the bids are under bidding process. So how long is the time horizon from the bid process to the finalization of orders? And once you finalize the orders, how long does it take to execute the same?
Typically, each defense projects are almost multi-billion-dollar projects, and the process is like this: that once the government issues the RFI, request for information, that means you have to provide the information about the project, and then you have to submit the price. This is called RFP, request for price. And then the negotiation starts. So this takes anything between 6 to 12 months, but the moment you get a contract, you will be busy for 6 to 8 years. And the process is very transparent. Defense, my experience is that 95% plus people are very honest. And particularly the top range, they are all very honest and transparent. And all of them are very happy because the Army, Navy and Air Force will have a serious challenge if they don't have an equipment system in place. And this government is matching their requirements and ambition. So I think this is the best time for anyone who wants to get into the manufacturing of defense equipments.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Any
Sir,
other questions?
Yeah, one. Sir, you spoke about the submarine orders and the corvettes which are in the bidding stage. How prepared is Pipavav Defense for these projects? We have tied up with some of the foreign guys who are there. What is the understanding now? With initial, say, supplies will come from the international sites, and then later on we start manufacturing in India. And how prepared is the suppliers for these components? We will just assemble it, or we will prepare the base for the suppliers for these sort of submarines or corvettes? If you can elaborate on it.
First of all, I am very happy to say that Pipavav is one of the 3 naval defense yard in the world. It's the second largest yard, dry dock in the world, which can build the asset of virtually any size or stature. We are the first modular warship building company in the country, which will mean that the warships and submarines can be built much faster. Let me give you a little bit of, divert a bit. In our country, the naval defense shipyards charge 300 to 500% more than the contracted price and delay between 6 to 8 years more than the contracted timing, which hurts the Navy very badly, which compromises with our national security. They have to protect our maritime frontiers. They are not able to do so. That's why there was a need for a private sector. So what we have done is that we realize all, and that's why we conceived this yard as an absolutely world-class and global scale, and build the infrastructure which can build the biggest ever ship built in the country, in the world. For example, you have a biggest aircraft carrier in US called Nimitz class aircraft carrier. Each one of them costs $16 billion. That can be built here or dry docked here. So we are absolutely capable of building in terms of the infrastructure. We have the finest technology partner in the world from US, Japan, US, Germany, France, and Sweden. And latest one, we have signed up with the Russian Ministry of Defense for modernizing the assets of Russian origin which are in use with the Navy. Number 3, that 25% of the contract value will be required to be imported, particularly those very complex weapon systems. Till such time that weapon systems factory is set up by someone else, our job is not to build the weapon systems. So there is a private companies who are looking at building the factories. So then until that time we will have to import. And in some cases, a main engine. The main engine, again there are no manufacturers in India. So approximately 25% will be imported, 75% will be built and being built at the yard itself.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
So any light you can throw on the aircraft, the Indian Air Force requirements for MMCR, the multimodal. I remember that the previous government had nearly approved Rafale, Dassault as the, there has been some rethink on that in terms of cost that this government is looking at. Is there any alternate to Rafale? That's one question. And the second question, and you're free not to answer this, was the rumor about Mahindra & Mahindra taking a stake in your company. If you don't want to answer this question, I leave it to you.
Insofar the MMRC is concerned, the budgeted price was $10 billion. And when they found out some of the so-called hidden requirements, etc., which probably, I mean, I'm not a competent person to comment on, probably that would help the Air Force a lot because of the very specialized weapon system they've offered, and etc. But the amount has gone to $20 billion. That has created there is ruffled a lot of feathers. So I think it's up to the government to negotiate, because they are the L1 on the face of it, or they can look at the Eurofighter. Eurofighter is a project which is being built by 4 countries: Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. It's an extraordinary fighter jet being used by at least 30-40 countries, when Rafale is being used by only 1 country, that is France. So while that aircraft may be the best, but I would personally prefer, if I'm the user, I would like to prefer the aircraft which is in use with 30-40 countries, and geopolitically, I'm better off having in a good books of 4 countries rather than only 1 country. So of course it's government choice, government's call. I mean, you and I are nobody to say so. But this is my very fair appreciation of the MMRCA. But whatever you may say, it needs to be finalized, because Air Force is in a bad shape. We do not want the armed forces to be up in arms, which will be very dangerous for the democratically elected government. We had a controversy, right or wrong, nobody knows. During the time General VK Singh was the Chief of the Army Staff, many of you would have read the article in the Indian Express. That was very scary. India, if that was the case, or if that had happened, that whatever perceived threat, India would have been pushed back by 30 years. We would have been treated like a Pakistan. So the issue is that you want them to protect 1.3 billion people, protect the maritime frontiers and the borders, and you don't give them the weapons to fight. Something may go wrong someday. So it is in the interest of the country and the government to make a decision whatever they want to make. Second question, I have not heard it. Thank you.